Hi, and welcome to this course on Step 4 of the Open Standards for the Practice of Conservation, or Conservation Standards for short. The Conservation Standards provide a step-by-step adaptive management approach that helps teams draw on existing evidence and team and stakeholder knowledge to design, implement, monitor, and evaluate conservation projects. The Conservation Standards helps teams integrate evidence and learn from their own monitoring results so that they can swiftly adapt to changes and new information. This Step 4 course will teach you how to reflect on your team's overall project progress and context, drawing on your monitoring data and any new knowledge you have gained since your team started designing and implementing your project. To advance and get the most out of this course, students must have a working knowledge of Steps 1, 2, and 3 of the Conservation Standards. This course is divided into 6 modules, each of which has a narrated lecture presentation. The course also includes stories from conservation practitioners in the field. You will have weekly assignments, peer reviews, discussion boards, and knowledge checks. Students who successfully complete the course and meet all the requirements can earn a certificate issued by the University of Wisconsin. The Conservation Measures Partnership has endorsed this course and has rated it as excellent. Again, welcome, and we are excited to accompany you during the coming weeks on this journey. This course focuses on the Analyze and Adapt step of the Conservation Standards and will provide you with vital skills for using monitoring data and new information to adapt as needed and improve your conservation efforts. The Conservation Measures Partnership, or CMP for short, is the author and steward of the Conservation Standards. CMP regularly updates the Conservation Standards, drawing on experience and lessons learned from its members and the broader conservation community. In Module 1, we will explore how your work in Steps 1 through 3 of the Conservation Standards provides the basis for the data analysis and adaptation you will do in Step 4. This is essentially an overview module, so we will do a quick review of the steps leading up to where we are now and then look forward to start analyzing and adapting. By the end of this module, you should be able to identify how Steps 1 through 3 of the Conservation Standards have laid the foundation for the data analysis and adaptation you will do in Step 4. Locate key components of a results chain that are important for the reflect and adapt process, and be prepared to start working on Step 4, Analyze and Adapt. The Conservation Standards shown here provide a set of high-level principles and practices oriented around a 5-step project or program cycle. You can find and download the Conservation Standards from the reading section for Module 1 on the course website. This cycle shows the 5 steps in the project or program management cycle. Good conservation practice means going through these steps iteratively, designing our initial project with the best available evidence, then monitoring to address areas of uncertainty, and using our findings to adapt and learn, with every step reinforcing the next. Even so, not all teams will start at the beginning, and it's quite common to go back and forth between steps. In this module, we will provide a refresher on Steps 1 through 3, which you should already be familiar with. We'll also provide an overview of what's coming in this course on the Step 4, Analyze and Adapt. Let's stop for a moment and look at adaptive management. What is it and why is it important? Where and when do we use it? We hear the term adaptive management used a lot, but what does it really mean? The Conservation Standards define adaptive management as the incorporation of deliberate learning into professional practice to reduce uncertainty in decision-making. Specifically, it is the integration of design, management, and monitoring to enable practitioners to systematically and efficiently test key assumptions, evaluate the results, adjust management decisions, and generate learning. It is an intentional process, not one of trial and error or learn by doing, and it draws on and iteratively incorporates evidence and new information to improve how conservation is done. Why is adaptive management important? When we prepared our strategic plan in Steps 1 and 2, we made many assumptions about the factors included in our situation analysis and our theories of change. We were more certain about the status of some factors and the relationships between factors than others. For example, in our situation analysis, we may have had some uncertainty or lack of information about the status of our conservation targets, the effects of direct threats to those targets, and the effects of different contributing factors on each direct threat. In our results chains, we may have been uncertain about whether one result would lead to a subsequent result, if changes in contributing factors would lead to threat reduction, or if threat reduction would ultimately result in improved status of a conservation target. Wherever there was considerable uncertainty and risk in our project design, we should have constructed our monitoring plan to gather the data needed to test these assumptions. When we analyze this data, we generate new information about the status of factors or the relationships among factors that may lead us to adjust the management actions needed. In other words, adapt to achieve our conservation goals. This new information is also used to keep improving our situation analysis and theories of change, or results chains iteratively. Adaptive management is not just learning by doing or saying, we'll see how it goes. Rather, it's taking from both practice and science to come up with the best way forward, given our existing knowledge, to advance our results, goals, and objectives. By definition, adaptive management combines action in the field to implement a project, gather data, and share experience. But it also involves working in the office to analyze and interpret data collected from the field. Data, information, analyses, and experiences from both settings work together to strengthen one another and improve opportunities for good decision making. So let's start with a quick review of step 1, which is focused on helping us to define the conservation situation in our project area. Situation models are a powerful tool in the conservation standards. In the following slides, we will explain some key elements of step 1 assess using a simple situation model. The assess step is designed to help teams clarify and build a common understanding of the context within which they are working, so that they are in a good position to determine what strategies are most needed. This involves first specifying the scope of your project or program, in this example, Eastern Bay Marine Resources, and then determining what are the priority species, ecosystems, and/or habitats they aim to conserve. In the conservation standards lingo, we call these conservation targets. Even though we are early in the conservation standards process, the team is already making prioritization decisions. An important aspect of the conservation standards is that they help teams focus and decide where they will redirect their limited time and resources. Once the team identifies its conservation targets, they can then think about how those targets are currently doing and what their desired future status is. You can see here a stoplight color key that provides a quick reference to their current status. Teams can use the work they do at this point to formulate specific measurable goals around the desired future status of their conservation targets. We'll talk about goals and objectives in a bit more detail later. A situation model also illustrates how relevant communities, residents, and/or stakeholders depend on priority ecosystem species and habitats. Here you can see the ecosystem services that coral reefs and sharks may provide and how they connect to elements of human well-being. Once the team is clear about conservation targets, they then identify the main direct threats to them. In other words, the human-induced actions that directly degrade the status of the conservation targets. Here you can see some climate-related direct threats such as increased storm intensity and increased seawater temperature. You can also see non-climate threats. Another prioritization step comes at this point where the team assesses its threats to understand which are the greatest threats. See the little icons where H is for high, M is for medium, and L for low? And all things being equal, the team will then identify where it may want to spend its limited resources. The team can then start to think about contributing factors, also known as drivers. They may be indirect threats like this one here, or opportunities like this one here, which are indicated by the little plus sign. Finally, here are some contributing factors driving illegal shark finning by mainland boats, and a note the team made about an uncertainty they had with this model. They are not sure whether their assessment of the impacts of climate change are solid and intend to reach out to a local institute with climate modeling expertise to double-check these. So what we now have here is a simplified draft situation model. This model provides a framework for thinking about what actions the team should take. So let's move on to a review of step 2, which is focused on using our work in the assess step to plan the strategies we will use. This step involves clarifying why we are using those strategies, how we think they will improve the context for our conservation and human well-being targets, what measurable goals and objectives we will set, and how we will measure whether we are achieving our desired outcomes. So this is where we left off with the situation model. The next step is to use this model to brainstorm potential strategies. Here you can see a range of strategies the team identified to affect different factors. These include strategies aimed at contributing factors, such as this one, strategies to address direct threats, and strategies designed to directly restore a conservation target. The strategy brainstorming also involves a prioritization process to assess which strategies are most likely to have the intended impact and are likely to be feasible to implement. Again, we can see the stoplight coloring here that indicates the team's assessment of the potential success of the strategy, with a green E indicating what the team thinks will be an effective strategy, a yellow N indicating the team needs more information to determine if the strategy could be effective, and a red N indicating the strategy is likely not effective. In step 1, assess, we were reminded of how situation models are a useful tool for clarifying context and brainstorming potential solutions. Now we will look at another tool, results chains or theories of change, to help us clarify assumptions, set meaningful goals and objectives, and track progress over time. Theories of change, depicted in results chains, help teams clarify key assumptions linking a strategy to threat reduction or a conservation goal. For example, a results chain would clarify the assumptions this team holds about its Stop Shark Fin Soup campaign and how it will improve shark populations. Results chains lay out a team's assumptions using an if-then logic. So here, the team intends to reduce illegal shark finning in Eastern Bay with the belief that doing so would improve the overall population of the number of sharks. They are aiming their campaign at consumers and key restaurants in the capital city with the assumption that consumers would become aware of and concerned about eating shark fin soup, and that restaurants would not want to continue serving shark fin soup. The team believes that the consumer concern combined with the restaurant's changing practices would lead to a reduced demand for shark fins in general, which in turn would lead to a decline in illegal shark finning in Eastern Bay. You can see a few yellow activity bubbles that represent some of the main activities the team needs to implement. They also help clarify the logic from one result to the next. The team also clarified the importance of sharks to subsistence fishers and human well-being of local residents. One of the great things about a results chain is that it provides a framework for teams to identify where to set measurable goals, which are tied to targets, and objectives tied to boxes along the chain. Here you can see some key points where the team set goals and objectives and associated indicators represented by purple triangles in this figure. Here are some examples of objectives and goals along this chain. Here for Shark 1, we see by 2022, more than 50% of the capital city restaurants are active participants in the Stop Shark Fin Soup campaign. You can see this is directly tied to this result right here, and the indicator for this objective falls right out of the well-worded text. Finally, here's a goal and indicator tied to the shark's target. Team's viability assessment in step 1 helped them formulate this goal. The goals and objectives are also a flag that monitoring activities need to happen to make sure the team remembers to monitor whether they are seeing the desired changes over time. You can now see these added as purple bubbles under all of the results that have an objective or goal. We've now covered the assess and plan steps. Let's move on to a review of the third step, where we implement our actions, do monitoring, and formulate budgets and proposals. To begin implementing, it's important to clarify who will do what and when. In other words, it's important to develop a work plan. Here's an extract of the work plan for the Campaign to Stop Shark Fin Soup strategy. Developing a work plan involves thinking about the different activities needed to implement a strategy, who will be involved, and how much effort or work units, which in this case refers to days, it will take them. The team can then roll up these level of effort estimates for other implementation and monitoring activities to get an idea of the overall level of effort for the whole strategy. The team can use its level of effort estimates to then get an idea of the labor costs involved with the strategy. Budgets will also include other expenses like travel costs and overhead. As you may recall from your work with Step 3 or your work more generally, teams typically develop work plans and budgets that are more ambitious than what they can implement with the resources they have. So they may need to prune their strategies and budget, much in the same way that you would prune a tree. This means the team will need to consider some criteria and make some decisions about what to eliminate, postpone, or scale back. Pruning your budget can be a healthy thing to do. Yes, it can be difficult, but it often helps us identify opportunities to do things differently and more efficiently with minimal, if any, effect on expected outcomes. When making these difficult decisions, it's important for the team to consider the potential consequences to their project of any strategy and budget shifts. For example, is the strategy or activity urgent? In other words, can it be postponed with little effect on the project? Are there interdependencies among strategies that require a certain level of effort? Are there stakeholders who might be negatively affected or whose support the team might lose? The team will need to consider these and other factors as they try to determine whether and how they can alter their overall project to align with their likely budget and resources, and ultimately determine if they can still be successful with their project. Step 3 also involves going out and seeking funding for your project. That means researching and understanding the donor's language and interests and putting together a compelling story for the work. The Marine team may be approaching several donors, but they need to understand how they can take the components of the strategic plan they developed in steps 1 through 3 and convert it into a proposal that a donor wants to fund. Many components will fit nicely into proposal requirements. Like here, it's clear that for Section 5.2 of this proposal, the Marine team should draw from the results chains, which include the overall strategy, associated activities, and goals and objectives. In preparing the proposal, the team will need to remember to consider the donor's interests, tie their work directly to those interests, and keep the proposal short but clear. The last part of Step 3 was about preparing for Step 4 and thinking about what data you need to track and the different systems you might use to do that tracking. As you may recall, over the course of your project, you learned about the systems for collecting and recording data, about progress on implementing your project, progress on achieving the results or outcomes you laid out in your plan, and changes in information available to you. Have you learned anything more since the start of your project that might influence the actions you are implementing or the potential success of those actions? Has anything changed in your context? This new information may come from passive observation, so maybe it's something you've heard or read about, or it could be something you actively pursued. For example, you may have conducted a study to gather new data or synthesized existing data. All of these, implementation progress, results progress, passive observation, and active pursuit, contribute to strengthening your knowledge around your project. So Step 3 includes identifying the systems you would use to track these elements and the gauges or dashboards that could provide you with timely information so that you can correct your course as you go along your journey. In the rest of this course, we will talk more about how you enter data in these systems and how you use it to help your team reflect and adapt. On that note, let's move to a quick overview of a few concepts you will see in later modules for this Step 4 course. This course is about the Analyze and Adapt step in the conservation standards cycle. It is the opportunity for your team to intentionally reflect on all you have done and accomplished, where you have struggled, and what you have learned. You will use all of this information and learning to help you make informed decisions about when and how to adapt your conservation actions. This course will continue to use the marine example, focusing primarily on the Stop Shark Fin Soup campaign strategy. You will explore how the Eastern Bay Marine team uses their overall results chain to prepare their data for analysis, how they enter data about progress on actions, both implementation and monitoring, and progress toward outcomes to create a stoplight diagram like this one. You will also learn about various ways to export and display data that you can share with your team, from charts and graphs to developing narratives. And you will learn how your team can then use the information you pull together to discuss and make informed decisions about your strategies and your overall project and whether and how to adapt it. So, to recap what we have covered in this presentation, we reviewed what is adaptive management and where and why to use it. Step 1, assess, where we assess the current situation by means of doing a situation model. Doing so helps the teams build a common understanding of the context within which they are working. Step 2, plan, where we determine the strategies we'll use to address the situation we assessed in Step 1. Step 3, implement, where we implement our actions, do monitoring, and formulate budgets and proposals, all based on the work we did in Steps 1 and 2. And all of that brings us to this course, which is about Step 4, Analyze and Adapt. In it, we'll learn how to intentionally reflect on all our team has done and accomplished so far, where the challenges were, and what we have learned. We will use this information and learning to make informed decisions about when and how to adapt our conservation actions. And just to round out the cycle, we have Step 5, where we share our learning, in particular with the broader conservation community, so we can contribute to the conservation evidence base more generally. We look forward to walking you through the next 5 modules of this Step 4 course.